5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to the GHT Overland podcast. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on the GHT Overland podcast.
And if you're a first-time listener, thank you for joining us. If you're a returning listener, wow, they came back. We really appreciate you. So thank you for tuning in. Lisa, I am stoked for our next guest this week. I am so inspired. Their story, their knowledge, legit knowledge, and experience in overlanding is awesome. And their grit when times get tough, truly impressive.
Well, talking about impressive, Kelsey working the winch line for like 2-3 hours? Amazing.
Yeah, is there a bigger word than impressive?
I mean, there's got to be, but I just wanted to help her.
That was awesome. She is an amazing woman. And maybe it's just me, but man, their YouTube channel, legit. Again, of course, you've got the great scenery and you've got the good adventure. A lot like our past guests, there's not the new word we learned. What was that? There's not the Instagramification. It's not like a perfect picture Hollywood thing. It's real life. It's overlanding. It's adventure. It's really cool things, but you've got challenges that go along the way. And they cover solid information.
Well, they do a short editor's clip at the end that really shows their fun, natural, goofy side.
Yeah, I always enjoy that quite a bit. So that's pretty cool. So I say we dive into the intro to introduce Tim and Kelsey of Dirt Sunrise to our amazing listeners.
Let's do it.
Oh, hey, real quick.
Yeah.
I had a cool idea today for our listeners to get a chance to be on the podcast.
Can we cover that in the post-show talk?
Okay. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the GHT Overland podcast. This is where you get the greatest interviews and insights from overland travelers around the globe, learning from their stories and experiences as we interview overlanders from places like Australia, Africa, the Americas, Portugal, and today, Ecuador. You will learn the basics to the advanced in overlanding, so buckle up and get ready for a new adventure. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lisa. Today's featured guests are Tim and Kelsey of Dirt Sunrise, a YouTube channel we've been enjoying for a few months now. So we're excited to have Tim and Kelsey join us today. Kelsey has an NPTC certification for winching, off-road driving, and instruction. She's been teaching at Overland Expo for the last 4 years, where she especially enjoys teaching women specific classes. Tim is a former desert racer, Overland Expo instructor since its inception, and received an exemplary service honor from the U.S. Department of Interior for creating the Four Peaks pickup. Tim and Kelsey also map roads for the U.S. federal government when they're at home. Their resumes are long with greater details, and we'll touch on those soon. For now, we are humbled to have Tim and Kelsey take their time to join us and to learn from their experiences and stories of overland travel.
So, without further ado, welcome to the podcast, guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're humbled that you've taken the time to join us, so thank you for that. Fill us in on any blanks, if you would, that we may have left out in your intro, and give us a little more detail about you.
Well, I think you nailed it. I've been in the industry for a long time. I started more on the desert side, racing. A friend and I built a race car, and we headed off to Baja, and that was kind of the beginning of that. All consuming for many years. And then when the overlanding thing started coming about, I got involved in that and just kept rolling with it.
Yeah, we actually met at Overland Expo. So we've both been in the industry, and it's kind of been a factor in our life.
A match made literally in overland heaven.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So describe to us where you're at today, like your location. If we were to step outside and look at the location where you're at, what would we see?
It's beautiful and green.
Green is good.
Yeah, we're in Cuenca, Ecuador, and we got an Airbnb. We do this every 2 or 3 weeks, kind of feel human again and get a shower and all that. And outside our door is a giant avocado tree. And then I think those Peruvian peppers.
Yeah, there's a Peruvian pepper plant. I think it's called apple pepper.
Oh,
and
cool.
They're quite spicy.
You had to try one, didn't you?
Yeah, of course.
That's awesome.
So tell us what inspired overland travel for you.
For me, when I was younger, it was just cheap freedom. You leave town. I grew up in Orange County, and so you either went to the ocean or you went to the desert. Once I found the desert, it just, I call it sort of around the corner fever. I want to see what's around the next corner and the next one and the next one. So Kelsey knows sometimes late into the night, we're still looking for that perfect campsite. And so it just took off from there.
Yeah, and then for me, I started on horses and getting that sense of freedom as well. And when I discovered vehicle travel, as much as I love the horses, it's not quite as complicated. You don't have to worry about feeding them and all that. So for me, it just made sense.
Yeah, that was really cool. I was reading about that, and that was super interesting. So how long have you guys been overland travelers, like full time?
Full time now, about 9 months, right?
Yeah. This is our first multi-month trip, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
Before this, it was just 3 or 4 day trips, weekends, and then occasionally we put together a 2-week trip and head down to Baja or something like that. But normal jobs, you just end up keeping it pretty short. I think I kind of was living out of my truck doing the mapping work when I was doing it full time. So I'd be living out of the truck. Sometimes they'd give us a Forest Service cabin to camp out of. Other times it was 100-degree days in a tent down in Yuma or something. So it was always variable, but it wasn't really overlanding. It was truly a lot of work.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay, very good. So did you guys spend a lot of time planning this current trip that you're on? And would you recommend to our listeners either spending more or less time than you did planning a trip?
I think we spent probably about a year seriously preparing for it. And that just in terms of selling stuff off and knowing that this was imminent.
Yeah, I think that once the decision was made, there was a ton to do to sort of like pack up your life and sell off. So that was the most stressful and complicated is we have too much stuff. We got to sell it. We need more money, so that's always on your mind. But if I were to recommend anything, it would be don't worry too much about planning. We run into people traveling on bicycles and in stock 50-year-old cars, and it just doesn't matter. I think that we'll always make excuses for ourselves why we're not going to go yet. Well, I don't have enough money. I'm not quite prepared. I need that new fridge. I need a rooftop tent. These are expensive things, and that's a lot of gas money you could be using. Just go.
Yeah, I think one thing we learned is you'll never feel ready. The day we were leaving, we still didn't feel ready.
That must have been pretty nerve-wracking because it's a complete change of everything that you're used to.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
You definitely lose the routine.
Selling all your
Yeah,
stuff.
and I think, it's just not that normal to leave your normal world behind, to quit your job, your family, your friends, no matter how nice they are, they're all looking at you like you're a little bit crazy. And so you have to sort of prepare for that. I didn't tell a lot of friends because I still thought, right up until the day we quit our jobs, we still might not go, right? Something could happen, maybe financially, maybe, something health in the family. I don't know. So we just kept it to ourselves. We're saving. And then all of a sudden, one day we're just telling everyone, yeah, we're quitting our jobs and heading out. And so I think that expectation of leaving is sort of terrifying to hang over you.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. So tell us a little bit about your vehicle, Goose.
I'll let Tim cover the details of that one.
We love Goose. So I've had a bunch of different trucks. I've had every make. Well, I don't know every make. I don't think I've owned a Peugeot, but had a lot of different trucks growing up, and always liked 80 series. They just seem like a good combination of new enough to be comfortable, good riding, and all that, but old enough to be simple for me to work on. And so I found it up in the Pacific Northwest, oddly, even with Arizona having no rust on their trucks. This one was just really nice from inland, sort of in the desert up there. And we've just been building it and working on ourselves. And we just knew it so well that for us, it was the truck to take. We didn't want to buy something new or different and be learning the quirks of it on the road. We kind of wanted the devil we know, versus something else.
Yep.
Yeah, we trusted how it drove, and we didn't have to relearn a new vehicle in so many senses.
Yeah, okay. And then the modifications for the trip, we could have gone with it just as it was. And in some ways, maybe we should have. But once we had the opportunity to get this pop top, and there's only 7 of them, that were ever made. So we drove to Canada, and it was an epic journey. And in the middle of winter in Banff, or Canmore, really, we cut the roof off it in a guy's garage, glued this thing on, and started driving back home. Then we gutted the interior, sprayed it with insulation. We redid the tent. We redid the gas struts. We had to redo the hinge twice because the first time I didn't do it well. It was just epic. And we took on a lot of extra work. It's paid off, and it's great. But really, in the end, too, we've sometimes gone, we could have just gone with it as it was. But it is great to be able to stand up inside.
Yeah, I bet it is. And for our listeners that may not be too familiar with you, go ahead and go through the make model of the vehicle.
Yeah, it's a 1995 FZJ80, so the straight 6 gas engine Toyota Land Cruiser. It's the last model from Toyota in the U.S. anyways, with solid axles. And so he's fairly archaic and simple, but new enough to be comfy and quiet going down the road.
Perfect. Thank you. So tell us about your cooking setup and any recommendations for our listeners in putting their kitchen cooking setup together.
So we have a 2-burner partner stove, which is just really nice to cook on. It's a lot more luxurious than just like a Coleman stove. So I really like having that. That's a big thing for me. And then we have Magma, I think is the brand, pots and pans, which are really nice. We just brought 2 of those, and we do all of our cooking on that. And then we also have like a GSI non-stick little foldable pan for like eggs in the morning. And then the other thing that's really handy is like, is it MSR?
Yeah, it's an MSR, basically a version of a jet boil, but it's their brand or whatever. And we just love that because a lot of mornings we're just going to eat, a piece of bread or, something simple. And we always want coffee though. So that's sort of our quick boil water. Don't need to get the stove out. Don't need to hook up to the big propane tank or any of that.
Yeah, that seems to be pretty popular. We see quite a bit of that.
Yeah, so that's really handy to have.
And I know too, the pans that we have are just stainless steel. They're not nonstick. Yeah. And I got to give a hat tip to Luis of Lost World Expedition because he was letting us know look, you can either choose nonstick or you can have stainless steel. If you choose nonstick, it's going to eventually get scratched up, and mid-trip you might be scraping things off the bottom and all that. So if you just learn how to cook with stainless, it's indestructible. In 20 years, you'll still own the same set. Yeah. And then it is nice to have that nonstick just for eggs and things that are really sticky.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, very good. And I had one question on the Maine stove that you've got. It looks like you have it set up pretty high in elevation. Does that work pretty good for you, or are you guys super tall?
No, it works pretty good. It's a little bit higher than, average countertop height.
Yep.
If we're parked somewhere where it does get real high, I'll just set it on the tailgate and cook there, and that always works.
Yeah, that was my relatively poor fabrication of a fold-down table. But it actually does work pretty well. But yeah, if let's say to level the truck or get our bed in the right angle, we put rocks under the rear tire sometimes, and then the whole tailgate, everything is moved up into the air, and then it can be a little high to work with.
Got it. Okay.
What is that one thing you value the most, excuse me, either on or in your vehicle?
I think just the capability of the truck is key to us getting remote. Obviously, a fridge and a stove are super useful for living.
I know, and everyone says fridge, and I know it's,
Yes.
what are you going to do, right? But these days, there's so many cheap ones, off-brand ones, whatever, that they're really affordable. We bought ours used. I try and always buy anything used if I can, because a lot of this stuff doesn't get used that much. We all outfit our trucks and buy stuff, and then life gets in the way. So I think for overland gear, there's so much great used stuff, but we do love that fridge, and it makes it possible for us to do. I think in Baja was probably the longest we went without seeing anyone, because we just drove to the beach, aired down for a couple of weeks, and so you can get enough food in there to not have to touch back with reality or supermarkets or big towns or all that sort of thing.
Okay. And we'll go into a little more detail on the fridge a little bit later, because it is a very popular and useful item. But just for reference right now, what make, model, what size of fridge do you have?
It's the ARB, and one of the relatively newer ARB ones. We've had an Angle in the past. I've had a Waco, which is now called the Medic. But this is the ARB, and I believe it's the 37. I think they call it 37, or maybe it's 35. So it's actually pretty small. I've had 50-quart ones, or 50-liter, excuse me, in the past. And it just seems to swallow up so much stuff that I've kind of learned going smaller for me is, I don't know, it seems to work better. We do the, put a couple of beers in the bottom, and then when you grab one out, put a fresh one in. So, but with the 50 quarts, I found you to try and fill the space, because the fridge will work better if it's filled. And so I'd line the whole bottom of it with sodas and beers and water bottles, and then put all the food on top of that. With this one, you do need to be fairly efficient with how you pack it, but it works. I think that we could have gone 45, and we had space for 45, and that would have been fine. But I don't think we've ever really been hurting for wishing we had more.
Okay, very good.
Anything you originally packed that you never used or removed from your overall setup?
No, we did pretty good. I mean, because we traveled in the truck quite often before this, we kind of knew what we needed. But we did add some free diving fins, because we thought we would use those a lot.
I pictured us just living at the beach the whole trip. And so in my mind, and in Baja, that was true, and so we packed those giant long free diving fins and a mask and snorkel and a weight belt and all that. And frankly, just some cheapo ones from Costco would have been fine probably, because you just aren't going out that often. And a lot of the times you're at the beach, there's a big reef and you don't know what's underneath the surface. It's not like a beach at home or a beach you're used to going to where it's safe to do this or that. It's every beach is new and wild, and you're hundreds of miles sometimes from a paved road, and you go, I don't think I'm going to go out in those giant waves right now and try and spearfish or something. So we just haven't used those much. So that's probably the least useful thing.
Yeah.
Glad we have some snorkels and stuff. It's just we didn't need to bring, wetsuit and all the fancier stuff as if we were going to be doing it constantly.
Got it. So what are your current top 2 or 3 destinations that you've been to so far on this trip, and a little detail on what made them so special for you?
For me, it's kind of funny because it's so close to home, but I love Baja. We just had so many cool experiences with locals. One of my favorites was because I'm slightly horse obsessed. We were trying to find a beach, and we ran into a couple of guys that had been stranded, I think, for 2 or 3 days in their truck. They just couldn't get it started. So they flagged us down, and as soon as I got out, there's a horse tied up to the truck that they were using to get back to their ranch to get food and water, and then they were able to get back to the truck that way. And so the horse was just tied up there. And as Tim hopped out to kind of help diagnose why the truck wouldn't start, the guy goes, "Do you want to ride the horse?" I was like, "Of course I want to ride the horse." So while the 3 guys are leaning over the truck fixing it, I'm playing off on a horse. And then as soon as the truck starts, I head back, and the guy goes, "Oh no, you don't have to get off. You can ride it as long as you want." And I'm thinking, oh, I'm missing something in translation. But sure enough, I was like, oh no, we're going to find a camp spot. And he takes the horse, throws the saddle in the back of the truck, takes the bridle off, slaps the horse on the butt, and just lets it go. So, he had offered that, yeah, ride it as long as you want, leave the saddle here, and just let the horse go. And that was cool.
Yeah, we were questioning our Spanish ability all day, going like, there's no way I'd ride the horse, and then when you're done, let it go. Like, that can't be what we're hearing.
Yeah.
The same guy also from the back seat of the truck, once we got it running, then we got it out of the sand and gave him a little tow. He pulls a rabbit from behind the driver's seat, and he's like, yeah, you want it? He's got a knife up to his neck. I was like, oh, we're full.
We've had too many rabbits.
Yeah, we've had too many, but it's just so nice. The kindness is great. For me, I think, I absolutely love Baja. Where else can you be in the mountains? And we had a mountain lion in camp, and you're in the pine forest, and then the next day you're in the desert. But Colombia for me was just amazing. The people, the big open spaces, it's sort of the opposite of Central America in the sense that you're back in a big country. You can be on these giant mountain roads with huge vistas, and again, you're going down in canyons that look like a small Grand Canyon. I just absolutely loved Colombia, the people, the food. For me, all of it was fantastic. Even the cities like Cartagena, which are super touristy, but they're touristy for a reason. They have legitimate history. And so we're not big city people, but we loved it. And the people were so kind.
Yeah, we kind of got stuck in Cartagena for a while.
Yeah, our truck. So the ship that was supposed to bring our truck from Panama to Colombia had some paperwork issue, and it sat for 2 weeks. And so what was supposed to be a 3-day wait in Cartagena turned into a saga of us jumping from hostel to Airbnb to hostel and waiting on the truck and checking the GPS of it every day, hoping it would start moving. And it was interesting, but it all worked out.
That's good. So that must be the backstory to one of your intro videos, or your intro video, with the white horse and the guys on the beach trying to get the vehicle started.
Yep,
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that video. You guys did a great job.
Thanks.
So any tips you've got for purchasing fresh meats and vegetables along the road during your travels so far?
It's pretty easy, really. I mean, roadside markets, any little town, especially on the weekends, has like a open air market with the cheapest veggies.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a weekend, we just kind of know, okay, if we pass a town that's got 5 buildings or 500, there's going to be a farmer's market. The farmers come in from the country on the weekends. And so if it's a weekend, you're guaranteed to find the most amazing produce and just some strange fruits and things that you can try. And it's so cheap. I mean, we'll fill bags with vegetables, and it'll be the equivalent of $1 or something like that. Meat is not necessarily tougher if you're bold, but, sometimes that same stall where it's, 95 degrees and they have the veggies you want, they've got a bucket of pieces of chickens, legs and heads and all that. And so it's sitting in the sun, and you're kind of like, all the locals are buying it, so it should be fine. But, from our background, it's sometimes tough to pull the trigger on the meat. So for us, we're eating a ton of veggies, but and we're eating meat too all the time. It's just sometimes we'll look at it and go, I'm just not that brave, So we'll hit a roadside sort of stand where there's a bunch of people, and we'll eat meat from there. Or if we're at an actual butcher, we'll buy some meat, and because you can just see it being butchered right there in front of you. But yeah, it's really been easy to find food. I think food's been the absolute easiest thing. When you're worrying about fuel and other things like that, or how do I find this bushing for this part, food's been the least of our worries.
Yeah, I would say the best tip is, shop at the local markets and buy what people are buying, not something that's been sitting there for a long time.
Yeah.
And then for us with the meats, I don't tend to do chicken just because it's so much harder cooking and keeping it in the fridge to keep everything around it clean and clean up afterwards.
What is a favorite meal or recipe you enjoy while traveling?
I like to do a lot of curries, which feel really luxurious and different than, if we're in a town and buying food. So that's a good one. One of the crazy things that we've recently discovered, actually through another traveler, was making really simple bread. Add whatever herbs and simply flour and water, and then, put some oil in a pan and fry that up. And you would believe how nice it is to have hot bread with any meal. So that's been one of my favorite recent discoveries. But a lot of pastas, like that, we do a lot of rice and pasta kind of as a base. And then we'll add in meat, and we eat a ton of veggies. Those are kind of the staples.
I think for us, the spices are such an important thing because you're eating a lot of the same food. When you're in a part of the country or a part of the world, you're going to see the same vegetables and the same food in general. So to make it seem different for us when we're having a lot of stir fries and a lot of, fried rice and whatever we're making is the spice. And so you can have the exact same ingredients you had last night, but with a whole bunch of curry or a whole bunch of like these spicy Peruvian peppers, and it's going to be completely different for you. So for us, that's been a good way to keep it from getting monotonous.
And how do you generally do your laundry on the road?
If we're lucky enough to hit an Airbnb or pay for a campsite that has laundry, that's definitely a huge bonus. But otherwise I have, how big are those water bottles? Like 2
let's see. So they are, well, some of them are a gallon. And then, when we can find a 2.5 gallon, that's great. So we can cut it in half and turn it into sort of our bucket, and it's
so I just keep laundry detergent with us and have basically a half bucket and hand wash everything that way.
Yeah, we've even done it, and people think we're crazy, but we've done it in salt water, and you'd think your clothes would just be a giant itchy, like all your clothes turned into wool. But it worked. In Baja, we did it, and I think a couple times in Central America, and clothes were clean, smelled good, and oddly weren't itchy. But I wouldn't seek out salt water to wash your clothes, but everything has really that we've tried. Just when you have to do it, you have to do it.
Yeah, true. Did you go back and rinse with regular non-salt water, or was it good to go after you washed and rinsed in the salt water?
No, I'm too lazy. I just use the salt.
That's really
and I was
interesting.
sure that
Okay.
it's like I don't want to put on that shirt, but it was actually fine.
Our family makes fun of it for us.
Oh yeah, they love it. They're like, in the video you're washing in salt water and it's so great, But awesome. They think we were lying to them, I think, or something. But no, it's worked. I mean, certainly fresh water is a lot better, and usually we can find it, I think. But in certain areas in the desert, you don't want to touch your fresh water for anything but drinking or coffee or anything like that. So we really try and preserve it when we're in the deserts. But since we hit Central and even now South America, I can't think of the last time we camped somewhere where there wasn't water within a mile. I mean, it's very different than the American Southwest, where I'm used to sort of, you don't mess with the water that you carry in the truck unless you've just got tons and tons of it. We walk with our little Lifesaver water purifier. It's a 5-gallon can. And you walk over, fill it up, walk back to the truck, put some pressure into it, and it'll start filtering water, and then we can use it for anything we need. So we're very lucky in this part of the world to just have water at our disposal.
Yeah, the real struggle is actually drying the clothes because it's just so humid here.
Oh, yeah.
That becomes the struggle.
Got it.
Yeah, more than once our clothes have smelled weird after sitting too long and not drying.
On Hygiene, do you have a shower and toilet setup, or what's your recommendation for keeping it simple and hygienic on the road?
Wipes we use a lot. Those are nice. If we're camping at the beach or near a water source, we'll take a natural shower. We have some shampoo bars that are all natural, so we don't have to worry about hurting or any of the life in the water with that.
What were they called? You found these things. It's like a bar of soap, but it's actually shampoo. And
interesting.
Yeah, they're great. A company called Lush makes them, and you can order them online. And I think they last something like 90 washes. We've been using one for this whole trip so far, so they last a long time. Mm-hmm. But that's been nice.
Oh, that's great.
But when we're out camping and stuff, we don't worry about it too much, but as soon as you see a stream or a river or a hot springs or even the ocean, we'll just go walking in with that little bar of soap and take a shower that way.
And we do actually have ways to take showers in the truck, but we find that we never have used it.
Yeah, we don't have I don't have a hot water pump on the engine or anything fancy like that, but we do have sort of a black rubber bag. It's not a sun shower. I went with a Swiss water bag because the rubber's very, very thick. So it's a secure way to carry water too, just to have an extra supply of water. But it's a black bag, and then I do have an extension hose on it with a shower attachment. So we could put it on the roof of the truck and let it sit in the sun and take a shower that way. We just find that we'll generally say, nah, tomorrow we're going to be at the beach, so we'll just go, there, or we're going to go to that river or that waterfall. We'll just go there. So. And
as far as a toilet, we do not have a toilet in the truck. We carry, what are those bags?
Wag bags.
Wag bags, yeah.
Some areas require you have a way to dispose of things like that, to go in a certain national park in a country. So we wanted to have those, or, an emergency or something like that. You want to have a backup, but they're really kind of stored and sitting there for an emergency only. And the good old shovel and a hike is the way we go.
Yeah. And a tip for females, I would, as gross as it sounds, a Shiwi, or there's different brands, but basically a way that a female can stand and use the restroom like a guy, and that's been really helpful.
Anything you change about your current setup?
I think we're constantly, that's almost what you do, I think, right? And even at home, I did it. You're always looking online and dreaming about that next truck. I think the problem is I absolutely know, after owning so many and at the expos and other events, you see every setup on earth, right? And none are perfect. As soon as you get an earth roamer, you have the luxury, but you can't do a lot of our favorite trails or get to some of our favorite spots. As soon as you go any smaller than us, you're traveling a little more like a motorcycle traveler. You can't carry as much food. And so I think we've sort of accepted what we have, and that every setup has its faults. We would like one thing, I think, on a future truck, which is to sit inside comfortably without the top popped, in other words. So you're in a city and it's pouring rain or it's snowing or it's whatever reason, high winds. You just want to be inside and read a book and rest. Maybe you're sick, maybe, something's wrong. But the ability to be inside the truck in bad weather and be comfortable sitting upright and all that would be a luxury to us. So I think in the future, I could see building a box on the back of our 80, or starting with a different truck like a pickup and building a box on the back that stays nice and low, so you're not hitting tree limbs, because we already hit so many tree limbs. The top of our truck gets a lot of abuse from trees. So I don't want to go too high. But for us, I think that box would be a nice thing to be able to sit at a table and spend a day inside.
Yeah, I think I would say kind of along the same lines, but make sure that we're able to stealth camp a little bit better than we are right now.
Yeah.
Right now we have to pop the top essentially to sleep, at least comfortably. So having an option to be able to sleep and have it just look like a normal truck.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of the van people we've run into along the way, they park their van in the middle of Antigua or wherever, someplace you're not really supposed to be camping, but it's late in the day. They park. No one cares, because they're not setting up tables outside. They're not looking like they're trying to camp in a city. They just are a parked truck. And so that's a really big asset, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. Cool. So tell us about that number one biggest challenge you've had to overcome on the road.
I think for me, not having normal life distractions. If you have a bad day or you're frustrated, I could hop on a mountain bike or, go hang out with a friend. So learning to not have those distractions was at first kind of a challenge. And so that's been a big lesson, to just kind of deal with things, your emotions, your frustrations, everything right then. And it was kind of eye-opening to just see how many distractions that you don't think are distractions we have in normal life.
Yeah, I sort of in a similar line. It's for me, it was realizing how populated the world is, at least in the Americas so far. I know as we get south into Peru, there'll be some big open remote areas, but after Baja, you off-road down a muddy track in the jungle, and you've been going for hours. There's no tire tracks, and you're like, we're really remote. We're all alone. This is so interesting and so cool. And you come around a corner, and there's a big farm, and they don't have a car. They have a bunch of mules or something. So everywhere we would go, you'd think you had gotten remote. And for me, I don't know why, that's always been the relaxation part of overlanding is we're remote. We're just with our friends, or we're just with a few people, and we're in the middle of nowhere. And this whole trip, every time we spend hours off-roading somewhere and we go down the beach for 2 days, you meet the nicest people, but you always run into people. And I think for me, my concept of what the trip might be was going to be super remote places, exploring places where most people don't go. And the fact is just that people are everywhere, and people outside of the U.S. walk, miles and miles and miles. So just because you don't see any tire tracks, you'll come around the corner and there'll be a town. So for me, I think all of Central, I was kind of like, where are we going to get remote? Where's our sort of in the middle of nowhere? And we did find some great spots, but it's kind of taught me too that everywhere you go, we'll walk up to the farm and say hello to the guy and get to know him. And we now have friends in just about every country, I'd say, that, are emailing with us. We met somebody for 5 minutes, and then, once a week, the guy with the mountain bike will email us and go, I just did another ride. And, he's in this little town in the middle of nowhere. And once we had bikes in common, we're now friends. And so if he ever comes to the U.S. or if we ever come back to his country, we're going to bring a bike and hang out. And so it's just extraordinary. So it sort of taught me to be less of an introvert and just walk up to people and say hello, instead of always hunting for that remote spot.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. So on border crossings, what tips do you have in preparing for them, and how long do you usually plan for them to take to get through?
I think the biggest tip I would have, I made a folder with, copies of passports, driver's license, car title, anything that we might need for the border crossing, and that has been really helpful. The only thing is usually they stamp your passport and then they want a copy with that stamp. So you still find that you have to, make some copies, and there's always a copy place right by, so it's not a huge deal.
Yeah, usually sometimes I've gone on a couple mile walk because that copy place, they were at lunch. And so you're now walking through some town and you're not even fully in the country yet. And the border folks said, hey, just go up the hill, turn left, then right, then left, and then you'll see a copy place. So if you can have some sort of tiny little copy machine, it'd be great. We don't, and we just don't have room for stuff like that. But I'd say the main thing for border crossings is patience. There is no timeline. There is no requirement for them to do anything at a certain pace. We've walked up and waited in line for an hour, and then as we get to the front of the line, it's lunchtime, and they took an hour and a half, something like that, lunch. And you just get used to big delays like that. And other times, if you get through in half an hour or an hour, you're happy and you're smiling and you just go, wow, that was great. If you're looking at iOverlander, which of course is a huge asset when you're doing a trip like this, some people say, oh, great, border crossing, 15 minutes. And the very next review will go, worst border crossing of our entire trip, 6 hours, so you just don't know. So going into it with no preconceived notion, going into it early in the day is really important, and just keeping your cool and relaxing and just joking about it. We'll just kind of laugh about it and go, oh, the guy who was just going to help us looks like he's on break, and he'll walk off and you'll see him a half an hour later. So you just have to roll with the punches, go with the flow. And we haven't had any scary or crazy moments, just time consuming. Yeah,
I think keeping a good attitude is key, because that people seem to be more helpful when you're in a good mood. And trying to avoid lunchtime is helpful, because they like to take very long breaks and everything shuts down. Lunch is anywhere from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. in that general.
Oh, wow. Any specific border crossing experiences that stand out to you?
Nicaragua is interesting. I mean, just because of the country and how it's run and everything, they're very strict. And we have heard people go through with no big inspection. We were somewhere in the middle. We've had friends just ahead of us on the road say they pulled our whole van apart. We were there for 4 hours. They looked at everything. And a lot of it was hunting for a drone, and we told them we didn't have one, but they kept searching, assuming, no, you young Americans we've seen have drones, and we're sure you have it. And so we went through a pretty lengthy inspection. We're lucky that it was a very hot day, very humid, and we picked the largest border guard who looked like he was not going to tolerate crawling into our little truck at 100 degrees, So he gave up pretty quickly, and we were thankful, but it was tense, it was a serious border crossing. He was saying, sign this here, attesting you do not have a drone and that you're not going to do this in our country or that. And a little more suspicious of us, I think. The moment we got in, the populace and everyone we met was amazing. I think Nicaragua was one of our favorite countries because absolutely. People were so nice and so friendly. And, if we'd been there 2 months before, it could have been very, very different. But when we were there, things were just amazing and the people were wonderful. But the border was a very serious place.
Any specific safety planning you do or tips you can provide our listeners on safety and security?
I'd say the biggest thing is just common sense, following your gut, making sure you're aware of everything. We haven't had any problems of anyone, trying to grab my purse or anything like that. I do take precautions of, making sure if I am carrying a purse, I carry it in front of me, not having things in your pockets, walking around markets. We find a lot of time that even little kids, you'll notice following you around or, accidentally touching your rear pocket if Tim has a phone or anything in it. And so we've just learned to be careful of little things like that, I think.
Yeah, I think before the trip, security was a much bigger concern. That's something that you can fret about, right? And so if it's there to worry about, you do. And we've met a lot of people with all kinds of wild security setups on their truck, but no one's ever had an issue. It tends to be crime of opportunity, I think. And so we have like a cable lock on our fuel and water cans on the back of the truck, because without it, you could just pick them up and walk away. So we have little deterrents like that. The windows are all limo tinted, so they can't really tell if someone's in the truck. That kind of, I figure, helps as a slight deterrent. But we've had no issues. And like Kelsey said, a couple times in markets, the really busy markets, they're pickpockets. There's people making their living doing that. And so they see a foreigner and might be an easier target or might be a better score, right? So we haven't had anyone do anything, but we've had a couple times where I think that little kid's like following us. He might just be curious, but they do use little kids because they're good at it. And so we haven't had a single issue. We really don't worry about security now, but the common sense for us, just being aware of your surroundings, noticing if you're in a crowd, what's going on. But in the country or in the small towns, we feel completely safe and have really stopped worrying about it.
And we do have an understanding with each other that if one of us says, I think we need to slow down, I think we need to turn around, I think we need to leave, there's no questions. It might not be the time to go, that guy seemed like he was, watching us or kind of following us. And it might not be the time to tell us, each other that right now. But we know that if the other says something like that, we've seen something.
Yeah.
And what are some tips you have for safe money management?
We do have one hiding spot on the car so that we have kind of a fail-safe.
Yeah, like we have the locking center console, a Tuffy center console with a key, but it's obvious with a key lock on it that's where you'd put your cameras and maybe some cash. So we have some money in there, but before we left on the trip, built a small secure spot that's on the chassis of the truck that we haven't gotten into once. And I just know that there's money in it. Before we left, you can go online in most states and say, I lost my driver's license and get a new one sent to you. And so we did that a few times. Just so we had some extra IDs and stuff like that. So if a policeman or somebody's holding on to it, you can say, okay, you can keep it. Yeah. So we have a little sort of safety box on the truck with money, some credit cards and some IDs and that sort of a thing, just in case everything else was stolen or lost. We have a sort of fail safe.
And then as far as getting cash when you get into a new country, we just go to an ATM. And luckily we have a card, so your fees get refunded.
Yeah.
So that's nice to have. But essentially you can go into a town or a country and get their local currency easy and quick. So
yeah, we've just been using that. We've had no issues with our cards getting scammed or anything. In fact, we flew home for Overland Expo East, a few months ago, and that's where my card got scammed. So in Asheville, North Carolina, somewhere, somebody took the card, and all of a sudden I got a fraud alert, and there was, $900 at like a
vape store or something.
Vape store. Like, no, it wasn't me.
Awesome.
So it was kind of interesting that after all this travel through all these countries and all of us worrying, oh, my card sooner or later is going to get scammed and used or whatever. It was back in the States that it happened. And then of course, getting a new card to yourself I think we're in Colombia. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult, right? So a friend visiting is a nice way to bring it down. If you put it in the mail, we've had a lot of friends have car parts shipped to them from the U.S., and sometimes they just never show up. Other times they say, I know it's supposed to be here today. It'll be here in about a month. So their whole trip is either delayed or they need to just forget about it and write it off and keep moving. So it's really tough to get.
Interesting. And so do you guys use like a Charles Schwab account, or what is it that you use so that you're not having to worry about ATM fees and all that?
Yeah, it's similar. It's a Morgan Stanley, and so it's one of those where they reimburse any fees, and so they don't have any of their own, and they'll give you back money for whatever ATM fees there are. So for us, it's just an easy way to withdraw money. And then, of course, when you're in places like Ecuador, using the American dollar, it's so easy. I know we're about to hit Peru, and so we're going to have to go back to doing math in our head a little bit, But yeah, that's been the best way for us to get local currencies.
Yeah, and we do have an app on our phone actually that you can add all currencies, so we can use that to convert.
Google Translate and then the currency converter are probably our most used things, just to go, I don't know what that word is, or this person's got a local dialect. Let's see if we can get them to speak into our phone, and Google Translate will usually figure out what they're saying. And then the same thing, of course, with the currency converter. You just get into the new country, and at the border crossing, you'll have guys willing to exchange money, but it's usually a really bad deal. So let's at least figure out how bad it is, and we'll negotiate with the guys, and we'll know where to negotiate from and say, no, that's a bad deal.
Have you ever watched sports?
Yes, I have.
When the elite athlete makes their sport look so easy, you're convinced strapping on skis, doing a double flip twist is totally something that you could do. Like just go out the front door, jump on the half pipe, and off you go. I don't know if it's a half pipe, but...
I think I could do soccer, but I'm not quite sure about the double flip twist. I think I'd break something.
Well, you definitely would.
Yeah.
But go and watch Tim and Kelsey on YouTube under Dirt Sunrise.
It's not so much that they make it look easy. They show the emotion, stress, and reality. But they show that anybody can do this.
Yep. And I think that that's really super cool. A lot of really great videos. So be sure and check out Tim and Kelsey on Dirt Sunrise on the YouTubes.
Our interview with Tim and Kelsey is our longer format interview.
Well, our newer, longer format.
Yes. And let us know how you're liking the extra details with longer episodes. However, we do split these in 2 episodes for your downloading pleasure. So don't worry. New episodes are released each Thursday.
And in next week's episode, we learn more about the finer details of Tim and Kelsey's overlanding setup. We discuss financing and enjoy more road stories from their travels, learning valuable tips and ideas.
Remember, it's a good idea to visit the show notes page on our website at ghtoverland.com/podcasts. Select the Dirt Sunrise episode. All the details and helpful links are already there for you.
Hey.
Yeah?
Remember, I had an idea.
Yes, you did.
For our listeners to join us on the podcast.
Yeah?
I think it would be super cool that if you would like to be on the podcast, if you have something to say about overlanding, a tip to share, an idea to share, or a question you would like answered, I haven't figured out all the details yet because it was just an idea, but you can send us a DM on the socials, Instagram, or what's the other one? Facebook. Or you can send us an email at ghtoverlandpodcast@gmail.com. You can go to our website. There's a place to fill out information there as well. And let us know what's on your mind. And maybe we'll contact you. So if you want to be on the show, be sure and include your contact information. We'll set up a time. We'll get you on the podcast. We'll do a little quick interview. I'm thinking just 10, 15 minutes. And if we could put 120 of those together, that'd be a lot of fun.
Ooh. That's...
Or maybe 10. Or maybe we start with 5. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Let us know what you think.
You're very excited about this.
I'm a passionate, excited person.
Yes. Let's let them get started.
Okay, so like I said, be sure to send your questions, suggestions, feedback, cries of outrage to ghtoverlandpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love it if you'd connect with us on the social medias previously mentioned at GHT Overland or GHT Overland Podcast. Now, immediately look at your phone, hit the share button of the podcast, share this episode with your friends who enjoy travel off the beaten path.
If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to us if you did 2 things to help out. Rate and review the podcast, that's 1. And subscribe, giving the GHT Overland podcast a little iTunes love. Thank you, and we will see you next Thursday for part 2 of the GHT Overland podcast with Tim and Kelsey. Bye.